Have you ever been in a room full of people and felt completely alone? Have you ever had relationships in your life and still felt somehow unknown within them? Like there was a version of you that others saw and related to, but that the deeper, more complicated, more vulnerable parts of you remained carefully out of sight. Or maybe you've noticed a pattern across your relationships, a tendency to give generously, but struggle to receive. To show up reliably for others, but rarely ask for help yourself. To keep conversations at a certain depth, warm, engaged, but never quite fully open. If any of that sounds familiar, you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not flawed. What you may be experiencing is something that has nothing to do with your worth as a person or your capacity for connection. It has to do with patterns, subconscious patterns that your nervous system learned often very early in life as a way of staying safe. Today we're going to look at those patterns honestly and compassionately, because understanding them is the first step towards healing. Welcome back. I'm Madeleine Lowry, a neural retraining specialist. We are continuing our series on loneliness and the nervous system. In our last episode, we established something important. Loneliness is not a character flaw, it is a biological signal, one that the nervous system sends when genuine connection is missing. And we made a distinction that I want to build on today. The difference between circumstantial loneliness, the kind that comes from external factors like a move or a loss, and the deeper kind, the kind that persists even when connection is available, the kind that follows a person from one relationship to the next, from one community to the next, leaving them with a quiet sense of never quite belonging and never quite being fully known. The second kind of loneliness is not primarily a circumstantial problem. It is a nervous system problem, and it is maintained, often invisibly, by a set of patterns, beliefs, and behaviors that developed for very good reasons, and now quietly keep genuine connection out of reach. That is what we're going to explore today. I also want to flag something for those of you who are listening to this series from the beginning. Much of what we'll cover today will feel familiar from our earlier series on sensitive people and on relationships. The patterns we are talking about, people-pleasing, over-responsibility, perfectionism, hyperindependence, are not new territory. But today we're going to look at them through a specific lens, how these patterns function as barriers to connection, how they create and maintain loneliness, even in people who appear socially engaged, and what that means for healing. In our next episode, we'll go deeper into one of the most significant of these patterns, social anxiety, which deserves its own dedicated conversation. Today, we're going to lay the broader landscape. To understand the patterns that keep us lonely, we need to go back to where they came from. Human beings are wired for connection, but we are also wired for self-protection, and when early relational experiences teach the nervous system that closeness carries risk, that being fully known leads to criticism, rejection, disappointment, or loss, the nervous system does what it always does. It adapts. It develops strategies for getting as much connection as possible while minimizing the perceived risk of genuine vulnerability. These strategies are intelligent. They are creative, and in the environments where they developed, they often worked. But carried into adult life, they create a painful paradox. The very strategies we develop to protect ourselves from the pain of disconnection are the same strategies that keep genuine connection just out of reach. Let's look at some of the most common ones. One of the most common patterns I see in people who struggle with loneliness is hyperindependence. Hyperindependence is not the same as valuing autonomy or enjoying solitude. It is a compulsive self-sufficiency, a deep resistance to needing others, asking for help, or allowing ourselves to be dependent in any way. It often develops in environments where dependence felt unsafe, where needs were not reliably met, where asking for help led to disappointment, criticism, or being made to feel like a burden, where the most reliable strategy was simply to learn to handle everything yourself. The hyper-independent person often appears strong, capable, and self-contained. And in many ways they are, but beneath that self-sufficiency is often a nervous system that learned a painful lesson. I cannot count on others, and I am safest when I need nothing from anyone. In adult relationships, hyperindependence creates a subtle but significant barrier to intimacy. Because genuine connection requires mutual vulnerability. It requires being willing sometimes to need, to receive, to let someone else carry something for you. When that feels threatening, when the nervous system interprets dependence as danger, relationships tend to stay at a comfortable but carefully managed distance. Warm enough to feel like connection, but not quite close enough to feel like genuine intimacy. Closely related to hyperindependence is a pattern that many sensitive, conscientious people know well: giving generously while struggling to receive. This pattern often develops in families or environments where love was expressed through service and caretaking, where being useful, helpful, and needed was the primary currency of connection. The person learns that their value in relationships comes from what they contribute, from being the one who listens, who helps, who shows up, who holds things together. And over time, this becomes the primary mode of relating. They are endlessly available to others, but when it comes to their own needs, their own struggles, their own vulnerability, they deflect, minimize, or simply don't bring it. I don't want to burden anyone. Other people have bigger problems. I should be able to handle this myself. This pattern can look like generosity, and in many ways, it is generous, but it also maintains a fundamental imbalance in relationships, one where the person is not fully seen, because the parts of them that struggle, that need, that are uncertain or afraid, remain carefully hidden. And a relationship where you are not fully seen is, by definition, a lonely one. Perfectionism is often discussed in the context of achievement and performance, but it plays a profound and underappreciated role in loneliness. At its core, perfectionism in relationships is driven by a fear. If people see who I really am, my flaws, my struggles, my failures, my messy interior, they will not want to stay. This fear often develops in environments where love or approval felt conditional, where mistakes led to criticism or withdrawal, where the message, spoken or unspoken, was that acceptance depended on performing well. In adult relationships, this translates into a carefully curated self-presentation. The person shows the capable, composed, together version of themselves. They are reluctant to share struggles before they've already resolved them, reluctant to be seen in the middle of difficulty, reluctant to let relationships witness their imperfection. And the painful irony is this: the very imperfections and vulnerabilities they hide are often the exact things that would create genuine closeness. Because real intimacy is built not on the polished version of ourselves, but on the moments when we let someone see what is underneath. Perfectionism keeps that layer permanently protected, and the result over time is relationships that feel safe but somehow thin. Loneliness dressed up as composure. Beneath many of these patterns are beliefs, subconscious convictions about the self that were formed early in life and have never fully been examined. Two of the most common and the most painful are these: I am too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too needy, too intense, too complicated. The person who carries this belief has been told, directly or indirectly, that their inner experience is excessive, that they feel things more than they should, that their needs are unreasonable, that they are in some fundamental way too much for others to comfortably hold. And so they learn to make themselves smaller, to manage their emotions privately, to present a more contained, less demanding version of themselves in relationships. The opposite belief is equally painful. I am not enough, not interesting enough, not successful enough, not attractive enough, not well enough, not worthy enough to deserve the kind of deep connection they long for. Both of these beliefs create the same outcome: a self that is not fully brought into relationship, a guardedness that prevents genuine closeness, a loneliness that persists, not because connection isn't available, but because something in the nervous system doesn't yet believe it is truly deserved or safe. And finally, I want to talk about withdrawal, because it is one of the most common and most self-reinforcing patterns in loneliness. When connection has been painful, when relationships have involved hurt, disappointment, rejection, betrayal, or loss, the nervous system learns to protect itself through distance. This can look like canceling plans at the last minute when social energy runs low, avoiding situations where genuine vulnerability might be required, going quiet in relationships where things feel uncertain or risky, pulling back just as connection starts to deepen. For people with chronic illness, withdrawal has an additional layer, because illness itself requires a degree of withdrawal from social activities, from roles and identities, and from the energy that connection requires. And what can happen is that the withdrawal that began as a practical necessity gradually becomes a nervous system habit. The world gets smaller. Social situations start to feel more foreign, more effortful, more threatening. And the gap between where the person is and where connection feels possible seems to widen. The nervous system interprets the withdrawal as confirmation. Connection is exhausting. It's safer here, inside this smaller world. And so loneliness deepens, not because the person wants to be alone, but because the nervous system has learned to prefer the familiarity of distance over the perceived risk of closeness. Looking across all of these patterns, hyperindependence, overgiving, perfectionism, the beliefs are too much or not enough, and withdrawal, there is a common thread. Each of them developed as a response to a nervous system that learned at some point that full, authentic presence in relationship carried risk. Risk of rejection, risk of disappointment, risk of being seen and found lacking, risk of needing and not being met, risk of losing something important. And each of them, in its own way, creates a version of connection that is real but partial. Relationships that exist but within which the person is never fully present, never fully known, never fully able to receive what connection has to offer. Which means that the nervous system's need for genuine connection goes chronically unmet. Even in the presence of other people, even in the context of relationships. And that is the invisible mechanism of the second kind of loneliness we talked about in the last episode. And that is why more social activity alone so rarely resolves it. And this is what I want you to take from today's episode. These patterns are not who you are. They are what your nervous system learned. And what the nervous system learned, it can unlearn. In neural retraining, we work with the subconscious mind to identify and neutralize the emotional charges behind these patterns. The early experiences that taught the nervous system that full presence in relationship was unsafe. And yes, we can do this even if you don't know what those experiences are, because your subconscious mind already knows. And as those charges dissolve, something begins to shift. The compulsive self-sufficiency softens, not into dependence, but into a genuine capacity to receive. The perfectionist guardedness relaxes, not into carelessness, but into a willingness to be seen. The beliefs of too much or not enough begin to lose their grip. The withdrawal reflex quiets, and the world starts to feel a little more navigable, a little more safe. These changes don't come from willpower or from consciously trying to behave differently. They simply emerge as the nervous system finds its way to a more regulated, more open state. And when that happens, connection becomes possible in a new way. Not performed, not carefully managed, but genuinely felt. If you recognize yourself in any of the patterns we explored today, the hyperindependence, the overgiving, the perfectionism, the beliefs about being too much or not enough, I want you to hear this clearly. These patterns developed because your nervous system was doing its best to keep you safe. These were intelligent responses to real experiences. They are not character flaws. They are not evidence that you are fundamentally unsuited for connection. They are just patterns that are stored in your subconscious nervous system. And patterns can change. In our next episode, we're going to go deeper into one of the most significant nervous system barriers to connection, social anxiety. Why it develops, what it does in the nervous system, how it differs from shyness or introversion, and why it responds so well to neural retraining. If you would like to learn more about this work in the meantime, please visit us at tcneuralretraining.com. Schedule a free consultation by phone or take our free quiz. And if this episode resonated with you, please follow the podcast, give it a positive rating, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for listening. Content of this podcast copyright 2026 by Twin Cities Neural Retraining. Music by Barbara Ben.